Across the aisle from me, Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And this is Gene Siskel, film critic for the Chicago Tribune. Grease resurrected high school in the 50s, and 1978's second biggest hit was an orgy of nostalgic escapism for college in the 1960s. The movie was National Lampoon's Animal House, which inspired a national epidemic of toga parties and put an actor named John Belushi on the cover of Newsweek. Now here's Belushi now at a fraternity beer blast, playing his favorite role, music lover.
Sorry.
He's great.
The movie was about the most animalistic fraternity house on campus, and I guess you could see there that Belushi stood supreme among the animals. Well, there are a lot of movies about students 10 years ago, too, but in 1968, the students in movies were staging protests and demonstrating against the war. Now, in Animal House, the administration should have been demonstrating against the students. If 1978 was a year for escapism, then Animal House was a perfect example. It was vulgar at times, yes, and it was sloppy, but it had more laughs per minute than any other film last year.
You know, the key to it could be that movies really do follow life, and that life on campus today is lighthearted like we see in that picture, not like the serious campus maybe 10 years ago, 68.
One of this summer's biggest box office hits, though, is Meatballs, which is a movie aimed squarely at younger teenagers. I think it's pretty much on target for that audience. It stars Bill Murray from TV's Saturday Night Live as a senior counselor at a wacky summer camp where Murray spends most of his time trying to make out with another counselor.
Morty! What the hell's going on here? Oh, Morty! What? Oh, Morty! Morty! Oh. She attacked me! Give me a break, Harrison. Oh, she came at me like an animal!
That was Kate Lynch there attacking the helpless Bill Murray. The summer camp in Meatballs is a non-stop epidemic of practical jokes, making out, cheating in the Camp Olympics, general chaos, and then there's a half-serious subplot involving a camper who's your standard, basic, shy little kid who looks up to the friendly counselor. Murray gives him self-confidence during a game of blackjack.
Shut up and look at your cards.
Blackjack.
Murray creates kind of a nice feeling there, sort of a gruff sweetness, you might almost call it. Meatballs is a pleasant, cheerful, unassuming summer entertainment and has its heart in the right place, and Bill Murray does a good job of holding things together. He has a confident, comic touch, kind of a nice, warm quality. I think kids appreciate. You like this guy, you know, watching the movie. And so for the right audiences, which is to say for younger audiences, I think Meatballs is a lot of fun.
Well, you're right. Murray does have a nice quality in the picture. I just was hoping this film would have been more like Animal House, sort of Animal House Takes a Vacation. I expected sort of a rougher, more lusty kind of comedy, and this film doesn't have that. So if you're going to see Animal House, this isn't the picture that they've made. It's a lighter piece, and
well,
that's my disagreement.
Okay, fine. It's not Animal House, but it's doing a lot of business. It's one of the biggest hits this summer because kids are telling each other about it. When you get word of mouth like that, it must indicate in some way that they like what they see. So I think for younger kids, once again, I'll say, this is a good movie.
It's better than the Disney features, at
Yeah,
least.
it's better than watching some dragon fly around on Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
But Bill Murray didn't hit at the box office until Meatballs, a low-rent quickie from Canada that was directed by Ivan Reitman and starred Murray as a spaced-out camp counselor. It wasn't a great movie and it wasn't a great role, but audiences reacted immediately to Bill Murray, and that got him his first Hollywood job in another screenplay by Harold Ramis named Catty Shack. Murray plays a guy in this movie who's a little bit goofy about gophers. He's a groundskeeper at this high society country club, has customers at it like Rodney Dangerfield, and then there's Murray, who lives in this little room with this kind of grungy little existence going after those gophers. He's kind of on that level. He's just about 6 inches below the level of the golf course as far as everybody else in the movie is concerned. Catty Shack was a movie where Murray was still feeling his way. I think he was upstaged at the box office and probably with some audiences by Rodney Dangerfield. Yeah. But the movie itself also wasn't all that great. It was important, though, to Murray because it helped him develop his on-screen persona as a bemused, slightly hostile guy who knows all the angles, even if the only angles he knew were gopher killing.
Yeah, you know, I think if he were to play that film now, I think he'd play it in a different way. I think he'd be more confident and wouldn't need all the grubby makeup and all the grubbiness and all the accent. He could play it straight now. As far as I'm concerned, one of the keys to him is that he doesn't need makeup. He could walk through his films virtually in a swimsuit, no matter what the story is, and we would watch him because what we're talking about is a comic spirit. I know young people respond to him because He doesn't demand anything. He doesn't demand respect from you. He acts like you would act if you were in a movie, which is silly and wild and having a lot of fun.
That kind of cool detachment that you feel if you also feel at the same time that the whole world is kind of against you. And these two movies we were talking about, Meatballs and Catty Shack, were at the time teenage pictures, movies that were shoveled into the theaters in the summertime, aimed at that teenage audience that goes to the movies then, and they found him first. They found Bill Murray long before millions of people went to see Ghostbusters and movies like that. Well, ever since National Lampoon's Animal House went through the roof of the box office 3 years ago, the summertime has become the season for at least one irreverent, gross-out, anarchistic, slapstick comedy. Last summer it was Airplane, and this summer it's Stripes, which is a very funny film that could almost be retitled National Lampoon's Animal Army. It stars Saturday Night Live veteran Bill Murray as the biggest misfit in an outfit full of misfits, a platoon of draftees who train themselves after their drill sergeant is injured. In this scene, they horrify the Army brass as they pass in review.
So am I to understand that you men completed your training on your own?
That's the fact, Jack! That's the fact, Jack!
The audience loves that scene, you know, up the establishment. Summertime movies like Stripes usually contain a lot of sex and raunchy humor, but you might ask, you might even wonder, how can Stripes find sex in basic training? Well, it does, all right. Bill Murray falls in love with P.J. Souls, who plays a military policewoman who strays pretty far from her beat. Here they are inside the home of the base commander who's out of town for the weekend.
You're incredibly head over heels in love with me.
No!
You're helplessly, hopelessly, deeply in love with me, aren't you?
Yes.
I knew it. I had that feeling, even before I picked this up.
Kind of like an orgy at Baskin and Robbins. Stripes goes on to an hilarious climax involving the Army's newest secret weapon, which is, believe it or not, a nuclear-powered, computerized, fully armored recreational vehicle. Some of the movie's early basic training situations seem like a male version of Goldie Hawn's Private Benjamin, but that's okay. These are both good movies, the two movies that make a great double feature someday. Stripes is a real breakthrough for Bill Murray, who had a big hit called Meatballs that really didn't do justice to his talent a couple of years ago, but this one does. And Murray is surrounded by a cast of great improvisational character actors, people who can somehow preserve the dramatic impact of a scene, even while they're going for the big laugh, and there are a lot of big laughs in Stripes.
Well, I liked it too. Maybe not quite as much as you seem to like it, but I enjoyed it very much. And I think what I enjoyed is finding, in addition to the obvious gags, finding sort of a comic attitude in Bill Murray that I think is sort of interesting. And that is, he seems to be always putting on how seriously people take themselves. The whole seriousness of romance in that last scene, the seriousness of the Army. He just goes right at the people. It's different than Private Benjamin, where she was the ignorant one. Here, he's the smart one laughing at them.
We might also mention Harold Ramis, who co-wrote this movie, and he was also one of the authors of National Lampoon's Animal House, and he's the co-star here, the guy with the big glasses.
That's the
in
guy.
The training scene.
Yeah, that's the guy who, when you were talking about character actor, who's believable yet funny. He's great, because he doesn't look like a movie star at all.
And he listens to all this solemn Army propaganda with a real solemn look, and you realize he doesn't believe a single word of it.
Yeah, it's a very good, enjoyable comedy for the summer.
Well, National Lampoon's Vacation is a goofy comedy travelogue about everything, just about everything that can go wrong when a family from Chicago travels west to the California fun park that the film calls Wally World. And Chevy Chase stars as dear young dad who wants to get a few more miles in before calling it a night.
Sparky, why don't you turn off the TV and come to bed?
Okay, honey.
Up and at 'em. We're here.
That's one way to find a parking spot, but that scene would have been better, I think, if they had kept that mood music, that Mr. Blue quiet music, instead of going to the jazz music.
Yeah, because the soundtrack music lets you know the movie knows what's happening. It would have been funnier with the
Just quiet with all the disaster going on. Now, this film is a no-brainer, to be sure, but the writers have come up with enough jokes like that one that ring true, and enough jokes that are so ridiculous, including one very sick joke about one of their maiden aunts who takes the trip on top of their car. Well, I think the whole thing works. And Chevy Chase has finally found a picture in which he can lean back and not force himself upon us. That's because the writing is so good. I like taking this vacation.
I like the first half of the movie better than the second half. At the beginning of the film, when they go to buy the station wagon, and it's got the 8 headlights on it, you know, kind of the Bruce McCall special. I thought this is going to be like all that great National Lampoon stuff that just pushes American consumerism right over the edge. Then in the last half of the picture, I thought they got so involved in resolving the plot that it was just like an Ozzie and Harriet.
You're talking about when they actually get to the amusement park?
How they get there, what happens.
The beginning is better. I still think that this has enough funny bits that I think that people who, after having suffered all this summer with vacations, I think they'll have a good laugh at the film. I did, Bing.
It's named Ghostbusters, and it's a funny combination of two kinds of movies that usually don't work very well together. On the one hand, this is a big-budget special effects picture with lots of sensational, earth-shaking adventures in it. And on the other hand, it's a very funny movie to listen to because of the sly and understated dialogue. The characters in this movie say some very funny things. In this scene, Sigourney Weaver becomes a potential customer for the Ghostbusters when she realizes that her apartment has become inhabited by a strange form of psychic energy that likes its eggs sunny side up.
Tell you what, I'll take Miss Barrett back to her apartment and check her out. I'll go check out Miss Barrett's apartment. Okay?
I love that one about the major appliance.
Right.
The Ghostbusters there were Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis. And one of the best things about this movie is the low-key, cynical dialogue that they exchange in a scene like that. I love listening to this movie. They sound like a bunch of old college roommates who are all in on the same joke. And that National Lampoon, Second City, Saturday Night Live style dialogue works surprisingly well with the movie's big special effects scenes like this one, where the Ghostbusters approach a psychic whirlpool that threatens Manhattan.
Okay, so she's a dog.
Usually when a movie has a lot of special effects, there's the danger that the characters will look like they're simply standing around posing in front of the special effects. Not in Ghostbusters. This is one of the slyest, wittiest big-budget movies I've seen in a long time, and the climactic scene where Manhattan is threatened by this really unexpected 20-story high monster has one of the funniest single shots I've ever seen, and I would tell you what that shot was, but it would spoil that moment of wonderful surprise, so my lips are sealed.
It comes out from another planet, I think, is basically the whole idea. The idea does. I think it's very funny, too, and I think you broke the film right into its two parts, the special effects story and this personal, whimsical dialogue between these guys, particularly led by Bill Murray. I like the second part better than the special effects stuff. I think it worked less well than you did. Murray, to me, is very funny. He's the leavening in this whole film, throwing these asides in constantly. This woman turns into a sort of a fire-breathing, lusty character, and he walks in and he says to her, that's a new look for you. You know, that's very, very funny stuff. And another critic, David Denby, New York Magazine, compared his role in this picture, quite properly, I thought, to W.C. Fields or Groucho Marx, who's always walking around their films saying, you know, winking at the audience. And Bill Murray provides that function here, and he does it beautifully. Well, it's a Bill Murray movie, and I loved it more than the special effects. Okay,
I love Bill Murray. What about Harold Ramis, who's not very well known? He's directed a couple of movies. This is his first big movie as an actor. He's the one he's the wise guy. He's the one who always has the long explanation. And the deadpan way that he delivers that is great. Aykroyd plays a basic Aykroyd character. These three guys could go on, like the Marx Brothers, if necessary, and make 6 more movies. They only should.
The person will make it work. It'll be Bill Murray in Groucho's role.
His name, Back to School, and it stars Rodney Dangerfield in his best role yet, a role that comes the closest to combining the Rodney that we know and love with a good story and some good direction. In the movie, Dangerfield plays a wealthy retailer who decides to drop out of a rat race and return to college as a freshman. He wants to help out his son, who can't get into a fraternity and is only the towel boy on the diving team and, in general, don't get no respect. Here's a scene that explains how Rodney gets the university to accept him as a student. Rodney's approach to undergraduate life is like a guy who walks into a bar and buys drinks for everyone.
But they use books.
What's wrong with used books?
They've already been read.
Yeah, and they already been underlined, too, get it?
That's the problem. The last guy who underlined them, he could have been a maniac. Hey, get these guys some new books. Get some new books, will you?
Dangerfield discovers a few aspects of campus life he can really identify with, like English professor Sally Kellerman.
And drew him down to me so he could feel my breath all perfumed, yes. And his heart was going like mad, and yes, I said, yes, I will, yes.
Yes, Yes!
The plot in Back to School has a lot of familiar ingredients in it, like the uptight dean and the crazy history professor and the campus jock who looks down on everyone. But what it also has, and what I like the most about it, is a lovable character for Rodney Dangerfield to play. He gets to use all of his patented one-liners and insults and put-downs, but at the same time, he's a sweet guy who thinks attending college shouldn't be any harder than selling slacks. My favorite scene is the one where he takes the class in business management and he tries to make a few helpful suggestions about the real world of kickbacks and payoffs. I was surprised how much I liked this movie.
I wasn't surprised because I like Rodney Dangerfield as soon as I see him on camera. As the camera hits him and I start to laugh. What amazed me is that it worked within this setting, because you would think that the last person that you'd want to go to school is would be one of your parents. I mean, you'd be freezed up, you wouldn't enjoy it. But if this guy were your dad, school would be a lot of fun, because he's a blast.
Yeah.
And he has this whole, you know, I'm an immigrant, I made millions of dollars, let's have a party. Life should be a party. And he's absolutely irresistible on camera. The character is beautifully written, beautifully played by Dangerfield. It's a ball. I had a terrific time.
It's also interesting because there's a very good screenplay here. It's not just Rodney Dangerfield and his one-liners.
Yes.
Obviously, the person who wrote this screenplay knew something about going to college, knew something about English lit. They take that scene where she's reading from Joyce's Ulysses is very beautifully done, and he is moved, and there's a certain genuine feeling to go along with the comedy, and all through the movie, there's a genuine emotional basis for the jokes, which helps to make them play better.
This is a good one. Good acting, good writing. Robin Williams' film Club Paradise is a resort comedy that would be twice as funny if it tried to be half the movie it wants to be. It wants to be a raucous, Americans get ripped off in the Caribbean comedy, as well as a political statement about international wheeler-dealers who want to turn the island into condominium complexes. But neither part of the film is very well done. Here's a scene where Robin Williams, the club manager, greets the passengers coming from America to his island paradise.
Remind me to get a new pilot.
That scene is slightly overdone, and here comes a scene with a shockingly old joke that I'm sure you know the punchline of. Robin Williams really should be funnier than this.
They weren't.
They said that you weren't fit to sleep with pigs, but I stood up for you.
What'd you say?
Said you were.
All right.
Oh, and then we all know the one about the dog. You know, that variation of the joke, I was telling that when I was a camper 15 years ago. Or
probably telling it better, too.
I wasn't a camper 15 years ago. I was a camper 30 years ago. Can't get away with that lie.
Maybe if you had been a camper 15 years ago, that would have been a funnier movie than Club Paradise.
Yeah, that's true, Ron. Well, that's a good one. I'm getting older. Maybe if the movie started with those tourists, it would have worked, although a lot of the jokes would have to be rewritten. But when the Islanders start revolting against the developers, then the movie loses its comic touch completely. As for Robin Williams, once again, he fails to get into his character. This has happened time and time again with him. He just chatters away as if he were doing his stand-up comedy act. There's not a lot to like, obviously, about Club Paradise.
You know, when he is good, Robin Williams can be so good, as he was in Moscow on the Hudson.
Right.
And as he's been in other films.
Or Garp. It was a terrific performance.
The amazing thing about this movie is it's very clearly set up right at the beginning of the movie that he's a Chicago fireman. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you want to make him a Chicago fireman, then how would a Chicago fireman act once he got to Club Paradise? Would he act like Robin Williams doing a stand-up comedy act and using references, one-liners, languages that a Chicago fireman wouldn't be familiar with? No, so why not make him a stand-up comic who goes to Club Paradise if that's who he's going to play?
Why can we think of these things and they don't?
I don't know, Gene. I think you probably learned it at summer camp 15 years ago.
Our next film is Ghostbusters II, the sequel to the best-selling movie comedy of all time, and it's a major disappointment. And what's so surprising is that the film contains little comic energy or invention. It looks as if the filmmakers, particularly the writers, simply didn't try to do anything special. The four Ghostbusters reassemble 5 years later to destroy a river of psychoreactive slime that has invaded New York City. Here they talk to the slime.
Whatever this stuff is, it responds to human emotional states. Mood slime.
The story is virtually the same as the original, save for the introduction of a baby, the infant son of Sigourney Weaver, who Bill Murray is still pursuing. She's divorced.
Well, what do you think?
Well, he's ugly. I mean, he's not Elephant Man ugly, but he's not attractive.
Was his father ugly?
Don't listen.
Murray is really forced to carry most of the movie with his wisecracks. The film really could have used more byplay between Rick Moranis and Annie Potts, two Ghostbusters assistants, babysitting and romancing.
I'm like a child myself. And you?
Now that scene isn't much, but it's appealing because it's at least different from the original picture. The rest of this movie, save for the introduction of the baby, is virtually a carbon copy with the Ghostbusters battling the slime as well as a 16th century demon hiding in a painting in a New York museum. The Ghostbusters seem tired of what's going on. The special effects seem all too familiar. I know it isn't true, but the movie comes across as if the guys were filming the first draft of a script.
I agree with you completely. This movie is a total disappointment. No thought went into it, no effort went into it, there's no comedy in it, and it's not just a critic sitting there in, you know, I don't believe in reviewing the audience. You and I both think that, you know, we have our own opinions, but I did go to see it in a real movie theater in Michigan with several hundred people, and they sat through the entire movie. They were there to have a good time. There was one laugh. One laugh in 2 hours.
I only laughed once. I laughed at the line about Laura Antonelli. I thought that was funny, but that's a movie related.
That's an in-joke. I mean,
sure
you and I, might know who she is, but
right.
How many Ghostbusters fans necessarily do? This movie is a complete disappointment. This is a demonstration of the bankruptcy of sequels. If you're going to make a sequel, you have to think it through. You don't just want to repeat it. You don't want to do the same thing again. And
I was very surprised because
I was shocked.
I figure, where's the effort?
Yeah.
You know you have a home run going in if you make a decent picture. How cynical to not even try.
Bill Murray is a mean and grouchy and nasty weatherman there, unhappy that he's been dispatched to Puxatawney, Pennsylvania to cover Groundhog Day. He's the kind of self-centered, short-tempered egotist who makes life miserable for everyone. Then something funny happens. He wakes up the next morning and it's still Groundhog Day. And he runs into all the same people and they say all the same things. Murray is the only one who realizes that time is repeating itself.
See the groundhog? Yeah. Think it'll be in early spring.
Didn't we do this yesterday?
This is one of the best scenes in the film as the weatherman tries to find sympathy from the locals for his dilemma.
What would you do if you were stuck in one place and every day was exactly the same and nothing that you did mattered?
That about sums it up for me.
Murray's producer is played by Andy McDowell, and like everyone else, she can't stand him. But since he can live the same day over and over and over again, he can ask people questions one day and know the answers the next. It's a great seduction technique.
Well, what should we drink to?
To the groundhog.
I always drink to world peace.
Groundhog Day was directed by Bill Murray's old Ghostbusters buddy, Harold Ramis, and together they've made a surprisingly good-hearted fable that sort of made me think of movies like It's a Wonderful Life. Basically, this is a story that boils down to a guy living one day at a time over and over until he finally gets it right. The film starts out as a comedy and ends up as the sort of fable that Frank Capra might have directed, and it really grew on me.
It did on me, too, and I'm glad that in addition to the more spiritual side of the film, that also Bill Murray, it was perfectly designed for Bill Murray because he puts down everything all the time in his film, and here he's putting down himself until it doubles back on him. It's just a good script, the right actor with it, and Harold Ramis does a very nice job. I liked it, too.
And you know, there's a real nice sense of the town there. I guess it was shot in Woodstock, Illinois, but it looks like the town in It's a Wonderful Life or some of those Capra towns, all the white frame fences and the insurance man on Main Street and the local people, and you get a real feeling for the fact that their normality is kind of a cure for Murray's
big city cynicism. Yeah, it works out very, very well. That's Al Franken as Stuart Smalley, the sweet, recovering overeater and traumatized son of a bad drunk in Stuart Saves His Family, a feature film based on a terrific Saturday Night Live sketch. And unlike most of the Saturday Night Live inspired movies we've been getting lately, this one works. It's smart and hip and doggone it, I like it. Stuart has a self-affirming public access TV show, but as the movie opens, he's lost it, giving him yet another crisis, which conflicts with his waiter's job where Stuart can't help but give advice to the customers.
Creamy Caesar. On the thigh. On the salad.
Another crisis, the centerpiece of the film, is that Stuart is drawn back into his dysfunctional family after his aunt dies. Back home in Minnesota, Stuart explains to his timid little mouse of a mother, played by Shirley Knight, a veteran with a nice piece of work here, the source of his problems.
It's a 12-step group I joined because I come from such a screwed-up family.
Another key character, Stuart's alcoholic brother, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. Stuart has advice for his brother's boisterous bar buddies, and the words sound right, with just a slight comic twist.
I think you're acting out the shame and powerlessness of that tiny, frightened child that's still inside of you.
Actually, the biggest source of trauma in Stuart's life is his miserable, boorish father, played memorably by Harris Yulin.
Look happy!
What I really like about Stuart Saves His Family is that something quite delicate is being attempted here. Al Franken's script has a core of reality and sensibility. I've read that he himself has been through a 12-step program, so he has the words right, and he just gives them an extra little spin so that they're sweet and clever, just like Stuart himself. It's a smart, funny picture.
It really is, and I was surprised because I thought that that sketch might not expand to a whole movie, and it does. And you know, at the end, this movie has more courage than a lot of presumably more serious films. They don't wrap everything up.
Well, the father...
People are still in recovery at the end. They don't have all their problems solved. Right. And the father says, if that's what recovery is like, I'd rather go to jail. And out he walks. And this movie, you're quite right, has a sweetness about it and a truth about it, in addition to a whole lot of good laughter.
Well, let me tell you, you know, satire closes Saturday night. And when do you get real satire? Now, this is sort of high-level writing.
Yes,
I
it
think
is.
this is a picture that I hope gets a reaction from the audience, because it's a good piece of work. And I suppose I left out, and we both left out, Al Franken's performance.
Yes.
I mean, he writes the character, but he also plays him and holds our attention throughout.
It's a good movie.
Multiplicity starts out with a terrific comic premise. Michael Keaton is harried at work, harried at home. He needs a couple of helping hands, preferably two that look exactly like his own, and he gets them from a mad scientist. And the special effects in this picture are compelling, too, as Keaton and his clone decide how they'll divvy up the work in his life.
Yeah, boy, between the two of us, we're going to get a lot of stuff done.
That's Andie MacDowell as Keaton's wife. Multiplicity begins to get routine, however, in its scenes of comic confusion. For example, when Keaton and his clone wind up in the same restaurant. And here, through a mix-up, the macho clone, known as 2, ends up with Andie MacDowell, while Keaton is stuck with the clone's date. Multiplicity becomes more provocative when one clone simply doesn't solve all of Keaton's problems.
Hi, how are you?
This latest clone, known as 3, embodies a more sensitive soul, but I kept wondering if Keaton was playing him as gay. The script of Multiplicity isn't that daring. Again, once the premise of an overworked husband is exhausted in Multiplicity, it's simply the special effects that hold our attention.
We tried, Doug.
She touched my peppy, Steve.
And yes, there's another clone. I suppose I've said it more than once in this review. Multiplicity, a terrific premise that loses its originality the longer it goes on, concluding, in fact, quite badly with 2 wimpy endings. I really enjoyed the first couple of reels of Multiplicity, but a mixed review, thumbs down for me.
Thumbs down for me too, Gene. And you know, this movie was directed by Harold Ramis, who wrote the original National Lampoon's Animal House, who used to be one of the anarchic spirits at Second City in Chicago, who's been involved in movies like Ghostbusters, and who here plays it completely safe. There was no idea in this movie, really, that couldn't be right at home in a sitcom or a made-for-TV comedy. It seems to me that there are all kinds of ways to take this premise and to push it into dangerous and daring areas where the comedy, as you put it, really has something that it's risky.
Well, I mean, when this started, I thought, you know, they're really on to something, because obviously men are stressed out at home and at work, just like women are stressed out who are working at home as well. And but beyond that, as you say, it doesn't go
Well, for example, there's everybody's curious, obviously, about what's going to go on in bed between Andie MacDowell and these 4 husbands that she doesn't realize she has. Obviously, there are things you could do with that to have insights into some of the humor and some of the realities of marital sex that they're not even interested in.
That would be the most exploitive thing. You could even do it at the workplace.
Not exploitive. You could do it cleverly. I'm not talking about exploiting the sex.
This doesn't do it, obviously.
Psychiatrist Billy Crystal not only has a gift, he also has a client that he doesn't want, mob boss Robert De Niro. In the comedy, analyze this. De Niro has what they used to call the shakes, and what they now call panic attacks. In seeking to deal with this problem, De Niro uses the same no-nonsense approach that has, well, kept him in the mob business so long.
Not Jimmy. I will do this myself.
De Niro's insistence slams into Crystal's life like a Justice Department subpoena. He ruins Crystal's wedding to a TV correspondent, played by Lisa Kudrow, who's just as willful as De Niro. Finally, Crystal gets to exert some influence over De Niro. He instructs De Niro to get in touch with his feelings during a phone call to a puzzled mob rival, played by a bullish Chaz Palminteri. It's polished and everything fits neatly into place, but it's all too predictable. It's like De Niro's doing an impression of Al Baldwin's impersonation of De Niro from Saturday Night Live. And Billy Crystal has gone from being in a Woody Allen movie to playing Woody Allen. Analyze this, congratulate you for keeping up with his safeness. I didn't much like it.
Oh, come on.
Where are we going?
It was fun. It was fun. De Niro, I think you're being very unfair to De Niro. I think that's kind of a glib line about him doing Saturday Night Live, because what De Niro was doing here, I think, is basically playing the guy more or less as he would play him in a regular movie. He's not adding a lot of level of satire. He's just kind of sincerely looking at this shrink and trying to deal with the fact that his whole world has collapsed inside of him. I think that De Niro gets the laughs by playing it straight.
Okay, here's what I think, because this is why I'm here. I think that De Niro's been doing this for so long, it feels like parody now. I mean, what felt like really original, inventive explosiveness is now kind of this hollow, predictable, dynamic stuff. And that's why it feels like he's doing it.
So what's he supposed to do, retire?
Well, he's actually more fun to watch when he's not doing this kind of stuff, when he's doing like a thing like he did in Jackie Brown, where he doesn't have the weight of the entire movie on him. I think it kind of works in this case.
I think you've got to have a De Niro to play this character. I mean, you can't just take an actor who isn't identified with mob movies and make it funny, because he has to bring to his relationship with Crystal some of the baggage of his other films.
Well, I think the movie actually, that's part of the joke, unfortunately. That's why I think the movie's kind of playing it safe, and that we're all in on this joke. He's been doing it for so long now. I mean, even the movies you could barely sit through, like Casino, that you might as well make fun of it. And Crystal actually comes off better because he's playing it from the outside. So you'll have that same level of sort of frisson. You're not feeling bad for him the way you feel.
Crystal's very good. And what about the big guy, Jelly, played by Joseph Vitarelli, who's kind of De Niro's bag holder? I thought that he was really good as a supporting actor.
The movie gets its laughs, but I think it's a glib, cheap comedy, and there's a much better version of this playing on HBO now, as you know, The Sopranos, which actually happens to be smart and about emotional involvement in a way this movie is not.
Okay.
Elizabeth Hurley is a salacious Satan who signs Brendan Fraser's hapless dork to a lifetime contract in Bedazzled, the latest comedy by Harold Ramis. Fraser plays Elliot Richards. He's an obnoxious but good-hearted loser who has everyone diving under their cubicles whenever they see him approaching at work. He's that annoying. For 3 years, Elliot has had a rather pathetic crush on a co-worker named Allison, played by Frances O'Connor, who couldn't pick Elliot out of a lineup. Elliot's contract gives him 7 wishes. His first choice is to be rich, powerful, and married to Allison. So the devil turns him into a Colombian drug lord. It takes Elliot a long time to figure out that if he's not very specific in voicing his wishes, Satan will find a loophole that will result in the wish backfiring. Bedazzled is a remake of a 1967 British comedy starring Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, but the comedy in this update is timid, dated, and uninspired. This is especially disappointing because Harold Ramis has been a major factor in such richly funny movies as Stripes and Ghostbusters and Groundhog Day. Fraser scores a few laughs with the different versions of Elliot that are created by his wishes, but he's no Eddie Murphy, and there's nothing in the Frances O'Connor character to explain why he's so obsessed with her. His relationship with the breathtaking Satan seems to have more potential. Maybe he should have pointed one of his wishes in her direction.
I agree with you about O'Connor, but I also was disappointed in Hurley. She doesn't have the sense of danger and risk that you need with Satan. Looking at the movie, I was thinking, how about Courtney Love in this role? You know, somebody who really would be able to kind of hex somebody. Yes, somebody who could play the devil. Elizabeth Hurley is too bland. She's playing the devil as a costume role rather than really bringing the kind of zest to the role that I think it requires.
I think they could have made it work with the gorgeous Satan if there was something there between maybe the Fraser character and her. But just to have her look good and wear all these little costumes, so what?